Born into a wealthy and artistic family in 1893, Winifred Nicholson was encouraged to paint by her grandfather, who had been close friends of many of the Pre-Raphaelites. She then attended the Byam Shaw School of Art prior to World War I. But it was not until she travelled to India after the war did her interest in colour and its connection to light and atmosphere reveal itself. In Winifred's words, "I saw violet in India, in the gossamer transparency of saris, in white marble palaces, in white sunlight, in the purple robe of dark bodies, in the darkness of great olive greenery of the giant evergreens." On her return, she met and married the artist Ben Nicholson, the son of notable artists Sir William Nicholson and Mabel Pride. They moved to Switzerland, ushering in a remarkable period in both her and Nicholson's career, painting together and critiquing each other's work. Nicholson said later that he learnt much about colour from Winifred. By the early 1930s, their relationship was under tension, not helped by Nicholson beginning another relationship with the sculptor Barbara Hepworth. They divorced in 1938, and Winifred then spent time between Paris and Cumberland in northern England. She painted prolifically throughout her life, and from the late 1930s onwards, her fascination for the rainbow and spectrum colours as seen through prisms became a major influence on her work. She died in Cumbria in 1981. When we look at Winifred's work, the main thing that stands out is the brilliance or the brightness of the colours of the flowers and the elements of landscape that she sees. And these are contrasted with areas of greys or colours that are desaturated. When you look at her paintings, you can see her using colours as they come straight out of the tube. And it's in looking at them closely that you can identify that one of the key colours, surprisingly, in her palette is black. Black becomes an important way for her to desaturate the surrounding colours or the surrounding areas to the flowers or the elements of the still life where she wants the colour to be bright. And it's this contrast of saturation that she uses that creates that feeling of illumination and light within the work. The other important element is that she diminishes the use of tones. So rather than relying on a pattern of light and dark to give that feeling of form, of roundness, a sense of space within her work, she's more interested in capturing that elusive element of light and illumination within her work, and she achieves this by mastering the element of saturation within her work. At this stage, it would be good for you to view the video that I have made on colour and saturation. Once you have watched that, you can then begin the exercise. So, I'm starting with a classic still life format here. I'm going to work in gouache, but this is an exercise that you could work with in oil paints, acrylics, watercolour, anything like that. You just want to be keeping the saturation being the main shifts, letting tonal shifts become the secondary shifts that you have going on. So I'm starting with this, as I said, a format that's approximately like a 16 by 20 inch canvas. So what is it? It's about 23.5 centimetres by about 19 I've drawn up there. Yep. So that's a sort of the proportions of a 16 by 20 inch canvas, which is a very classic size for still life. And I'm going to keep my colours fairly basic, just to keep my mixing under control. So probably just ultramarine blue, which I've just put out. I'm going to stick to one yellow, which is like a cadmium yellow. And then I've got a colour that's out that's a bit like cadmium red. Being gouache, they don't necessarily have the same sort of names as what oil paints and watercolours, etc. tend to do. They tend to sort of go into generic names like scarlet and yellow and things like that. So I'm going to work with a rough sketch from life. So you can see here a photograph of a still life of some pink ranunculi in a vase with a jug beside it, and that's going to be the basis of my design. And then with either an imagined landscape or an observed landscape, so you can use maybe one of the landscapes that we've done in a previous exercise, or you may come up with a completely new exercise, a completely new landscape for this exercise that you might want to use. But I want you to have that that look of the windowsill and maybe a piece of part of a wall, like what we see in a Winifred Nicholson. So sort of a casement window, maybe. A sense of it being maybe a deep space. And then there's that landscape beyond. So we're going to, so as I said, I'm going to just work on a fairly gestural drawing. So something like that. It's quite good, quite easy to work with. So as I said, either pick some flowers, buy some flowers, I don't mind what you do, or set up a still life. And it doesn't have to have flowers in it, of course. Flowers are good in terms of you getting that bright colour. So think of something though in terms of the still life that you want some brightness, some saturation in terms of the colours. As this is developing, I'm probably not going to include the jug that you saw there before. I'm going to keep it really very, very simple, keeping it to that. And then I'm going to include a landscape in the distance. where I would start with is getting that bright areas of colour down first. So that's where I'm going to establish the shapes of the ranunculi. And I'd recommend doing this in sort of a fairly broad, impressionistic, for want of a better word, manner. If we look at Winifred Nicholson's ways that she works in fairly each part of the little flowers, and each part is sort of built up with a series of brush strokes. So that would be, and I mean working maybe with a squarer brush, if you have it, helps you to do that. She's not, when she's looking at the flowers, looking at them in terms of the lights and darks on them. She's looking at trying to replicate their structures, their shapes. So she's not painting the light dark pattern that she sees on them. She's painting the shapes that she sees. So by putting down, I'll say, the saturated colour first, you're going to be able to judge and work all the darker colour, or the desaturated colour, I should say, from these areas of saturation that you've made. If you were to try and put this in afterwards, you would have trouble in that you might have painted all your other parts down not saturated enough or desaturated enough. So I would recommend starting from these areas of saturation to begin with. It will help you then establish those areas later as we go. So now we've established those brighter areas. You can then start working on any other areas of bright. So I mean, there's the lovely stalks and parts like that, which again keep them fairly loose for this exercise. We're not, as I said, we're not going for any great feelings of realism. It's about controlling tones for this exercise. The last area that we'll work on is that we're just going to start to paint the vase, and this is where we can maybe start to play with a little bit of desaturation. So here I've just added a little bit of greyness into those greens. So that straight away that vase starts to sit at a different position. Then begin filling in the landscape and the window surrounding your still life element. Just make sure that all the colours that you mix have grey added to them in these sections so that they become desaturated, and so that it lets then those initial areas that you've painted with saturated colour really glow and illuminate your still life. So as always, good luck with this exercise. Play with how you apply the paint in terms of your brush marks and what you do in terms of the scene itself. But most importantly, try and really push that idea of minimising the tones that you use and maximising the levels or the shifts in saturation that you do. As always, good luck, and I will see you again soon.